guys. Don't go anywhere. This next session is one of the more important topics that we're here to talk about today. By the way, wasn't that fun? You guys got to participate. How many got it right? How many picked the right investors? Few of you guys. Okay. All right. A powerful societal movement is underway to ensure that women get their say and their seat at the table. How do you ensure it's a lasting change? How do you make sure that the women found and lead technical companies that receive the VC funding they deserve and it has often eluded them? What's the key to the diversity in all of its forms? How do we beat this? So these are big and they're critical questions for the tech industry, and we've got an impressive group of experts here to weigh in. So please welcome our moderator, Fortune's Kristen Bellstrom, joined by, and we have a large cast here, joined by, let me roll down through here, Jager McConnell, Jenny Lefcourt, Melissa Cullens, Manon DeFelice, and Denise Hamilton. Welcome.
All right. Thank all of you for being here today to talk about diversity and inclusion in tech, a very important topic. As you can see, we have quite a large panel up here, and everyone's from very different types of backgrounds. So I'm going to ask you guys to just say a couple of sentences about what you do, what your company does, and so we can get a sense of how you're feeling about things. I'd like you to give the tech industry a letter grade on where it currently stands in diversity. We'll start with you, Manon.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Manon DeFelice, and I'm the founder and CEO of Inkwell. At Inkwell, we connect senior-level talent with flexible jobs. We really believe that flexibility is a solution to the diversity problem in tech and across the board. Grade. The fact that Jager's here, very exciting. So I'm going to give us a B-. Okay.
Hi, I am Melissa Cullens. I am the Chief Design Officer at Ellevest. We are an investing service specifically targeted towards women because we don't tend to earn as much and we never die. So if you use the traditional gender neutral, which is actually based on men's salary curves, we end up hundreds of thousands of dollars short over the course of our lives. What's the grade? D-.
I'm Jenny Lefcourt. I'm a venture capitalist, and I think more relevant for me being here is that I'm one of the founding members of AllRaise. We're a new nonprofit dedicated to increasing diversity in both funders, meaning venture capitalists, as well as founders. Grade, I have to say, for the amount that we talk about the subject, I give us an A, and the execution, I give us an F.
Okay.
My name is Jager McConnell, CEO of Crunchbase. We're trying to connect the world's companies to each other. And for a grade, it's hard to give us anything better than a D-. So I'm going to stick with
God,
it.
I'm the most optimistic one of the group.
It's good to have one optimist.
Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Hamilton. I'm CEO of WatchHerWork. My job is
Fan club in the house.
I curate female brilliance. I film successful women and organize their advice on the web so other women have it when they need it. Things like, how do you ask for a raise? How do you tell your boss you're pregnant? What do you do if a client hits on you? Nobody has the answers to all these questions, but I believe that together we all do. So that's what we do at WatchHerWork, and I give the grade of I, which is incomplete. We've done a lot of great talking about it, but we don't quite have enough work product yet to make a grade.
All right. So Jenny, I want to start with you because I think we all know that who gets funded makes a huge difference in who's going to be the most powerful people in tech going forward. And we know that women and people of color and the LGBTQ community, too many letters, don't get very much at all. So before you were an investor, you were also a female founder and one that was successful in raising money. So tell us a little bit about what that experience was like to be out there pitching what I can only assume are mostly white men.
So when I was pitching for my first company, it was about 20 years ago, and yeah, I was only pitching white men, and to be honest, I'm so goal-oriented, I really didn't care. I didn't even question why I was only pitching men. It's just that's who was on Santa Road, that's who gave me the capital to go build the company I wanted to build. So there wasn't really talk about it. It didn't feel strange to me at all, and luckily I was able to find venture capitalists who could believe in our vision and fund us. So fast forward to becoming a venture capitalist, I start looking at the data, and I'm hearing about it, but I don't believe it because I'm thinking I was a woman and I was funded. What's the problem? Well, it turns out it's a huge problem, and it's literally the number of venture capitalists who are women, I think, are under 10%. So you're talking about the vast majority are not. And then I think it's 3% of venture financing goes to women or women-founded teams.
Yep.
So, I mean, the disparity is just too enormous to ignore. And so that's, once again, what a bunch of us are working on changing.
And do you have any advice for people out here who might be raising money now that you're on the investing side, particularly for female founders, for founders of color, things that they can do to put themselves in a better situation?
Well, I would say that the good news for you all is that you are in a good position because there isn't a VC who isn't honestly trying to do better. Now, we all have unconscious biases, so I'm not claiming that they will, but I think that it's being talked about a lot and people want to make changes. So rather than be a deer in front of headlights and think, uh-oh, I'm a woman, or oh, I'm a person of color, I would say be loud and proud about that because that's actually probably going to help you versus hurt you at the end of the day. However, at the beginning of the day, you may not have the network, which is ultimately what matters. So there's some sort of systematic or systemic problems that have to be fixed.
Yep.
So that's sort of an easy hypothetical to throw out to you or theoretical to throw out to you, but the network matters.
So you mentioned that stat about how much funding women get. If you actually narrow that and look at women of color, I think the last stat I saw was that they get 0.2% of all venture capital funding. So I think that tells us a lot about, for women of color, they're dealing with their setbacks related to their gender and also to their race. And even we see on our panel today that we are perhaps doing a little better with gender inclusion than racial diversity. So, Denise, I want to ask you, do you have any suggestions, any things that we can be doing to help support women in tech and help them Black women in tech and help them succeed?
Absolutely, my favorite topic. What does an ally look like? I'm on this panel today right now because an ally spoke up for me when I wasn't in the room. And creating a space for women of color is just so critically important. Amplify us on social media, cover us. There are a lot of journalists that are here today. Cover our stories, they're valuable as well. Be careful that we don't substitute unconscious bias for facts. Of what a good idea is not only measured by how much money you raised. We received, I think last year, 0.2% in VC funding. If you rounded it like you did in third grade, it'd be 0, right? So if you use those stats to determine my value before you even meet me or hear my idea, you've missed out on my special brand of genius. And there's a lot of genius in this room that's valuable and needs to be heard. So create a space for us and speak up for us when we're not here, not in the room with you, because it matters. Unfortunately, your voice matters sometimes more than mine. So raise it and use it on my behalf. It makes a difference.
Okay, so thinking about allies, you might have noticed that we have one white man on our panel. Thank you, Jager. We need your help to make a difference in this area. So, one thing I wanted to ask you about specifically is, I think about a year ago, you made a pretty public statement about worrying about unconscious bias and how that might affect hiring at your company. And you actually put your phone number on the internet and asked people to call you if they were interested in working for you. So why would you do that? And what happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to get out of your network, right? Like, if you look at my friends list and my LinkedIn profile, like, there's a lot of people that look and are just like me. And that's not great, because a lot of us say, well, the best hiring comes from your own network. And that's a great way to have a nice monotone culture at your workplace. So how do you break out of that? How do you go and try to find ways to break out of that area? And we brainstormed and a lot of different ideas. And one of them was, well, let's just put our phone number out there, or my phone number out there, and say, if you are in a sort of minority group, if you are in a disadvantaged group, you have a direct channel to the CEO. And sure, we got some crazy responses, but we also got some great candidates. And so it's how do you find unique ways to break into other areas? And that's what I was trying to do there. Text it right now. You can text it.
Follow-up question. I found it on the internet pretty quickly when I was researching.
Do it. 415-881-8828.
Say that to your phone. So Melissa, you are in a position where you are you're working at a female co-founded fintech company. It's largely run by women. It serves women. I'm assuming that has not been the case at every job you've ever had. And I want to ask, is there something that jumps out at you about how that environment is different?
Yeah, no, I've never been in a room with almost all women. I'm almost always been the only woman in the room. And I think what really stands out is diversity is important because it's the right thing to do, but diversity is important because it's made our product better. When we went out and did our initial research at Ellevest to understand why women weren't investing to the same extent that men do, one of the things that really stood out was your background and how your parents taught you to think about money will be how you think about money for the rest of your life. So if my design team is all a bunch of like young, well, I think I'm young, 30-something white hipster women from Brooklyn, I have no perspective. There is a complete lack of empathy for people other than me, which means that we will not have good product market fit, and ultimately that the business itself will be less valuable over time. So if I think of something that really stands out, then having a more diverse team has given us the ability to make better decisions and to be a stronger company.
Interesting.
So can I ask one question? So is your team really diverse? Are there a lot of men as well as women?
Yeah.
Or is it, okay. Because that's something that I think is really important point about diversity. The pendulum can swing too far the other way. And so if you believe in diversity, sort of its highest calling, it's that truly diverse groups produce the best product, the best outcomes.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for us to think about diversity as widely as we can. Age diversity, diversity of location. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I'm actually living that by being a company based in Houston. Being 47 years old.
Wait, not everyone's in Silicon Valley? What?
It makes a difference.
Yeah.
There's great ideas everywhere. You don't have to live in New York City or LA or Silicon Valley to have a great idea. And we have to create on-ramps all over the country. We're trying to compete with other countries all over the world, and we don't develop our own people. And we don't create, I always say when I counsel and mentor other diverse founders, I say that as African Americans, we have been left out of every wealth-generating episode in this history. Whether it's the gold rush, whether it be the GI Bill, just name the whole list. I refuse to be left out of this one. I just refuse it, and we have to create on-ramps that we can all participate in. Geographical, race, age, it's all got to be a part of the mix.
I agree.
So let's also talk about another group, which is working parents, something that I'm sure a lot of people here one that a lot of people belong to. So Manon, your company basically takes companies that are interested in finding good talent and matches them with good talent that needs flexible scheduling, right?
Yes.
So what percentage of the companies you work with are in the tech industry?
So I would say that startups have been really open to this concept because they need really great senior level talent, and maybe they can't afford that $500,000 price point full-time in their office. And so at Inkwell, we do two things. We do full-time flexible placements. So you could be a CFO of a company 3 days from home, 2 days from the office, or you could hire someone 20 hours a week at that senior level. We've seen that 50% of women that graduate from the top business schools in the country have dropped out of the full-time workforce within 10 years. And so I had kids young, and I started to see this brain drain around me and thought there had to be something between 100 and 0.
And how do you feel like tech companies are comparing to non-tech companies that you're working with?
So the larger companies that we've worked with, the bureaucracy within the company to try to change to a flexible schedule. Is that, the CEO might be all for it, but by the time you get kicked down to the head of HR or maybe the head of hiring or, some of the lower levels, it just seems complicated, too much work, they don't want to do it. So the startups, even, the larger startups, seem more open to, thinking outside of the box. There's an untapped workforce of talent out there that prioritizes flexibility over cash, and we can harness them as a way to get more diversity on our teams.
We started to have a pretty animated conversation backstage about mentorship and the role that mentorship plays in bringing people up through the tech industry. And particularly in light of the Me Too movement, there have been some interesting stats that have been out there talking about men being less willing to mentor women or sponsor women for some reason. So I'm curious to hear what the panel has to think about that, and maybe starting with you, Jager, just because you are the man on our panel.
Sure. I mean, I have mentored several women in my career. My secret to success is don't be creepy, and you're fine. So just don't be a creep.
That seems like an important point. Has anybody else experienced this? Have you seen this or heard this from men that you work with, or know that this is a concern? Do you think this is a real thing, or is it something we shouldn't be worried about?
I definitely think it's a real thing. I've heard, we actually just ran a kind of small group event in Houston called #BenToo, and talked with men about how they were feeling about it. And I was actually surprised at how many men said, I'm just not going to do it anymore. I don't want to be falsely accused. I don't want to be caught up in anything. And I thought that was so odd because I was like, this is a really avoidable problem. I don't think this is a thing.
No.
But if you feel like it's a thing, that makes it a thing, right? And so that kind of eroding that, chipping that away, and talking with men and really encouraging them to feel comfortable with that, I think is super, super important. We are in an echo chamber. We all agree that Larry Nassar was a creep, right? Don't we all agree? We all agree. Yes. We're in an echo chamber, but if we don't involve men in this discussion, it's a waste of time.
Okay. I also think it's not just black and white. Like, it's not just good guys and bad guys. The problem is it's like people that we loved and cared about and were friends with can do bad things, right? And so that Me Too movement sort of made everyone realize how ubiquitous the problem was.
Mm-hmm. I also wonder about, we are talking more about diversity, to your point, maybe not always acting on it. And, now we're talking more about how women are treated, and there has been some fear that there is a backlash in the tech community against that. I'm curious to hear if any of you have seen that or experienced that and feel like that's something that we should be concerned about.
So I guess I would say overall that the response has been incredibly positive to recognizing that we have a problem, right? And that we are better than this, right? We're better than the data of the now, and to be a part of that change. I think when you start to hear about backlash, I think a few things are going on. One is there's confusion and lack of education. And then two is I think that people have to be really careful not to be victims of a situation. So one example I have is I met with a woman about 2 years ago who was looking for funding. I was not interested in her business. I actually don't think it was or is a good business. And I gave her the feedback. And at the end, she said, I know if I were a man, I'd be funded right now. And I was like, oh, that's not doing anyone any favor. So I think it's sort of both sides. And I think when the backlash comes from the other side, it's people who are confused, who are like, we're trying. We look at businesses. We fund the ones we're most interested in. Those happen to just have all been white men, right? And what they don't understand is how do they go about changing what they're seeing? How do they increase their network? To your point, if they put their phone number out there, they would probably see things that are not just in their network. Yep. So I think the more the whole industry gets educated, the better off we'll be. But the backlash, I think, is pretty small compared to the overwhelming desire to be better than we are today. And I would say it's by men equally as much as by women. And I think the men are a little bit in a tough spot because most don't know what to do about it. And they're not as comfortable as Jager is of being that white man who starts speaking on the subject, because a lot of times there's backlash at that, which I think backlash in general, like, let's applaud anything that's positive and a step in the right direction. And if you're going to just attack anything that isn't perfect, you're not being a part of the solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, another piece of it, another response that's critically important is not for those of us that are women and people of color to not withdraw from the system, because that's the other backlash, right? You know, I have to protect my magic. I got this magical little entrepreneurship kind of bubble right here, and I've got to protect it. And intellectually, I feel like, well, 0.2% of us got money last year. This is hopeless. Let me pull out. But if we all pull out, guess what the stat's going to be next year at 0.1%, right? So we've got to stay engaged with the system and continue to participate and chip away. And that's difficult, but if we all leave, it doesn't get any better.
For the women on the panel, question about, I mean, we've all heard about mansplaining, manterrupting. We know that there are actual different ways that men and women communicate in business settings. So I'm curious to know if you have come up with any strategies, things that have helped you, that maybe you want to share with people, things that have helped you make your voice heard, make sure that you're getting credit for your own ideas.
Yeah, I mean, even early in my career, you know, I'd remember walking into the room, being, you know, maybe the youngest woman there, and there'd be the row of chairs around the table, and then there's the row of chairs, like, sort of on the outside. And so to sit at the table in the middle and get a seat.
Literally
at the
table. Yep.
Don't take the seat in the back, sit there. And, you know, advocate for yourself. If there's a conference you want to speak at or be a part of it, you know, reach out to people that, you know, you can get a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm. Any other tips?
I think you also have to find more than a mentor, but a sponsor, and preferably a sponsor who already has a seat at the table who can advocate for you in your absence. I mean,
can you just define the difference between a mentor and a sponsor for people?
So a mentor is someone who's there to help guide you. A sponsor is someone who's there to speak for you on your behalf when you're not there. And having somebody in a position that gets you, that knows what you're about, that knows what you bring to the table, who's willing to be heard in a room where you aren't being heard, because there's only so much we can do to overcome that. It's not that we're not talking, right? It's that it's that no one's listening. So you need to have somebody that's got a good megaphone that can help you out.
And I have a little bit of a different angle on that, and it's on mentorship as well as sponsorship. So one is that we were talking about this before, I am a hearty believer that greed is the best motivator, right? And that it needs to be something, mentorship should be symbiotic, and that if you go up to someone, you're saying, hi, will you be my mentor? It's a very odd thing. That person's probably struggling to keep all their balls up in the air, and now you're asking for something, and it's a hard thing to respond to. So you're just better off in general of paying it forward and saying, hey, I can help you with A, B, and C. Would you like me to do that for you? And if you start putting it out there, then good things come to you versus going out there and asking someone to have your back or care about your future when they have no reason to even necessarily know who you are, or let it organically occur. And then also on people, what was the other word? Not the mentorship, the sponsorship. I think that that's great and fine, but I would say even more powerful are finding your common allies. So let's just say there is a group of 15 and 3 of you are women. Amplify each other, right? Because there's power in numbers, and then you all are kind of equally motivated versus asking someone necessarily to have your back. And so I'm not against it. I'm just saying I think there are sort of sometimes more organic ways to get what you're after. And even just to All Raise, the nonprofit that we spoke about, that came together because we're a group of women who had a common connection. And for the first time, basically all the women GPs were working together. So I think the more it's natural and all interests are aligned, the more likely you are to be successful.
It sounds like we're talking about, it doesn't necessarily need to be one or the other, that sponsorship, mentorship, and creating these networks of people that can be helpful to you and who are aligned with you could be very powerful, and that those are all different strategies. I want to take an audience question now. There's one that is, how do we get the women who have built wealth to become investors in women-led companies and to help break the cycle? I mean, that seems like a natural one for you, Jenny, but if there's anyone else who wants to take that.
I'm happy to take it if no one else wants it. So I think I guess I would just elevate that question to say, how do we get women, people of color, other diverse groups to be successful? Because success begets success. So if there's a woman who is successful at founding a company or somehow has wealth, being in a position of power is helpful. So I think it's a little bit, if you get too focused on that woman has money, now she should fund just women. Well, if you fund just women, you may or may not be as successful. You want actually every woman to be as successful as they can be. And it isn't just as clear of a straight line between point A and point B that women who have money should fund other women.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Okay.
does. We are running a little short on time, but I want to let everybody weigh in one last time and just ask you, if you could push a magic button and change one thing about the way the tech industry works today to help increase diversity, what would it be? I know you have to keep starting because you're sitting next to me, but Manon, I'm going to ask you to start.
I would say be open to flexible and alternative work schedules.
Equal pay.
Big one.
I would say more objective standards so that unconscious biases don't sort of dominate your behavior.
I think you need the people that are in privileged groups should use our privilege to go and empower the people that aren't. So if you're on a panel where it's not diverse, you should say don't do the panel unless it's diverse. If you're going to a conference and you see that it's not diverse speakers, don't go to that conference. Same with investors. Same with the company you work at. The people,
Vote with your dollars.
Yeah, that's right. Use your privilege to actually help force the change. Don't just say thanks for the privilege and move on.
Scaffold inclusion. Build a structure around it. Understand that you have to do a little bit more. It's going to take actual investment, actual commitment, and that scaffold won't be there forever. But right now, it's what we need. We're failing. We're not doing a great job, and we've got to do things that are authentic and really shore up these founders of color and women if we really want to see a change. So put your money where your mouth is.
I think that is a great note to end on. I want to thank all of you guys for coming out today.
Thank you.
Thanks.